Hi, I'm Sheila Kuehl. Welcome to Get Used to It. Today we're going to do one in our occasional series, which is actually becoming more than occasional, which we call Voices of Our Lives, where we interview one person who has virtually spent their life working for and in the community, making a difference. And our guest today is such a person, Jean Harris, who is a lifelong activist, political organizer, a fundraiser, and currently executive director of Basic Rights Oregon, which is the largest gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender statewide political organization in the country by membership. And I'm sure you know a lot about what has gone on in Oregon, the anti-gay initiatives, and the wonderful and successful work that Jean and the organization have done. Welcome to Get Used to It.
Thanks a lot.
Happy to have you here.
Good to be here.
So we know a lot about what you've been doing lately in Oregon, but I bet a lot of people don't know you grew up in California.
Probably not.
Tell us about sort of
Long Beach, California.
Long Beach, California?
I was actually born in Huntington Beach. And when I was 4 years old, my parents bought a house in Long Beach and grew up in Long Beach. Went to school, went to college, got married, had kids there.
Oh, wait. What a beautiful and ordinary life, huh?
Kinda.
So, grew up in Long Beach, went to college in Long Beach too?
Yeah, Long Beach State.
So a local girl.
I'm a local girl.
Were you working while you were married?
For a long time I didn't, but then I actually, my first job was a campaign job, paid campaign job in 1971.
Now not everybody is really interested in politics or giving time to work in politics. Was this something that came from your family growing up? I mean, were they sort of politically involved?
You know, when I look back on it, well, my mother was, I remember during the Adlai Stevenson Eisenhower presidential election, my mother was very opinionated about, you know, anyone who does not vote for Stevenson needs to leave the country or whatever. So, you know, very strong-minded, very opinionated. And my dad was a union steward for the union at Fiver Board where he worked. And I remember him taking me to work when they were on strike and, you know, walking the picket line. And
when you were a little girl?
Yeah, when I was little.
So what kind of an impression do you think that had on you, looking back?
Well, I'm a strong union person today, and I know it had to be just from, you know, just the whole justice end of it and being out there. I can remember, I thought it was pretty exciting at the time. I didn't really know what was going on because I was, you know, a kid.
Sure.
But it just seems so powerful. You know, like, hey, these people are all out here, it's nighttime, they're, you know, a lot of, you know, love and stuff going on that you don't really think about when you're a kid, but you know it's just kind of exciting and it's cool, and your dad's like really into it.
A lot of the women, especially in our community, who've gotten deeply involved in organizing, whether it's in the community or 501c3s in the community, political activism, protest, whatever, have gone through sort of a series of experiences that have which they develop their organizing skills. And I was thinking, I joined SAG as a child, and looking back, that experience, I mean, it was really about organizing and about getting something done through working together. What kind of a union was it that your dad was in?
It was AFL-CIO. He was ran a printing press, and they did, you know, multicolor printing on egg cartons and Tampax boxes and, you know, not very thrilling, you know, just sort of routine stuff. But I remember that he used to go to union meetings every other Friday or something. It was like, oh, Dad's at the union meeting tonight kind of thing. So,
well, it's kind of a bit of a stretch, though, from the apparently ordinary, and I know no life is ever ordinary, but married, had two girls, two daughters?
Two daughters.
To a community activist in gay and lesbian community. How did that transition come about?
You know, I've thought about that a lot, and I think that if you look carefully, anyone who's been a housewife for a certain period of time, especially if you're a housewife in a household where Your husband has got, you know, not a really high paying job if it's a young family, you're just starting out, and you're constantly trying to figure out the relatives and juggling, you know, the visits and the holidays, and you got to get the kids ready, and you got to get your husband off to work, and you got to get that checkbook balanced, and you got to make sure that there's at least 10 cents left in that bank so you don't overdraw and bounce a check, and you're constantly juggling things all the time, and you don't really realize that what you're doing is totally organizing everyone's life to make things come down right on a timely fashion, and that everybody's ready and it's happening, and you're not having a breakdown yet. And I think a lot of sort of the social issues that I unconsciously learned from my parents and just our whole background, and that experience of having to organize so many people's lives every day, that, you know, that was easy. That transition into politics was pretty easy.
Now, did the transition into politics precede your having to kind of come to grips with your understanding that you actually were a lesbian?
I was involved in the anti-war movement, anti-Vietnam War movement, when I was still married. My husband and I were both involved in it, and started doing what I really think is grassroots organizing through a lot of issues, the farm worker issue and the whole Vietnam War stuff, and the civil rights stuff. And then I got involved in the Democratic Party and more, you know, sort of status quo kind of things.
Well, but that looks like a real transition to me, and I could be wrong. So many people in the anti-war movement, and maybe say a little more about what that involvement was like, don't make a transition to politics, don't like the notion of politics, or especially electoral politics.
Well, that's true, but to me it was clear that the system that existed in this country, especially about who was making decisions around the Vietnam War and the funding and the troops and all of that, was right there in the United States Congress, and that those elected officials were making decisions for us, making decisions for people that we thought at the time the majority of people were opposed to the war. And I think that we combined the sort of education and the grassroots of going the people to people and talking about the war and trying to move people from being hawks to doves, that the way to utilize those grassroots people was to go and meet with those elected officials and try to force them, or to have them see the light and agree with us on the positions around the war. And at least in California, there was this thing called the Set the Date statewide organization, and the whole thing was to get people within congressional districts together and organized and go and meet with their elected officials and try to move them around the Vietnam War. And that's how I think the realization of, as long as this system is here, we have to deal with the people who run for office and get elected, and we better have our own people have a seat at the table if we really expect things to change. So that's how I got into it. It just seemed like that fit for me.
But at this point, you were still married, still
married. I was housewife.
Virtually straight.
Housewife for 10 years.
And so what happened, Jean?
You mean about the housewife thing? Well, hey, it wasn't my fault. My husband said, "You're in love with your best friend."
Oops, wait, let's back up a little bit. You went to Cal State Long Beach. I think you indicated to me that you had gone to take a women's studies class.
Right.
And talk about that time in life.
You know, my husband and I actually were both going to night school together. And we had this vision that we were going to both be school teachers, and we'd have, you know, the summers off, and, you know, have the kids and be able to spend a lot of time with the kids, and that was sort of our vision. And a friend of mine suggested that, you know, why don't we take a couple classes or try to take a class during the day? And there was this whole women's studies thing, and let's take this class that's about our bodies ourselves, and we wanted to learn more about, you know, the whole woman thing. And so we took this class together during the day when the kids were off at school and husband was off at work. And I just started like hearing things and realizing things that I just had not thought about before. Like, wow, I'm really smart.
Huh.
Like, wow, look who is in control of all these different facets of society. And back then, it truly was, when you turned on a TV screen, it was male commentators, and you know, and the whole medical industry was sort of run by men, and even the armed forces and the police department were men, lawyers were men. It's just like I went, wow, something's not right here. Like, why wouldn't you utilize the brains and the intelligence and the experience of half the population? And I kind of, you know, and I would take these questions home to my husband, and I'd say, you know, we did this close your eyes thing and visualize, you know, what it would, you know, who is sitting in the chair in this position of power, and I just realized that something's not right. And I would, you know, go home and go through some of the same kind of things that we did in the class. And he started getting a little irritated about it. And I'm going, you know, this isn't about you, John. This is just, you know, this is like, can you believe this? Can you believe this? You know, like, I was outraged, and he was getting uptight, and I really didn't understand what he was being so uncomfortable about. And it was just that kind of awareness that, you know, there was more to what was going on out there than sort of picking the kids up at school. And
Well, it was a really heady time. I mean, you and I are pretty much in the same generation, and I guess to me, some of the strange part of remembering that time is how I had never thought about these things before.
Right.
You know, I mean, dating in college, I would sit in the car and the guy would get out and walk around the front of the car and open the door for me. I never thought, gee, this is weird, you know, I can open my own door. It was simply so taken for granted that so many little things like that, you know, adding up to a society, and what the women's movement started calling cliques, where you would just come to a realization that you've never thought about before. It sounds so antiquated now, where people grow up understanding that we've identified these problems and, you know, and been working on them from the point of view of the women's movement. But it's very difficult to explain how it just didn't occur to us.
Right. Those consciousness raising groups. Oh. It's like we started talking about, it's like so many things that I didn't think about because I was just doing what I was supposed to be doing. You know?
Well, but was it really the same way with sexuality? I mean, that came as a surprise to you?
You know, it did come as a surprise to me. My husband and I were boyfriend and girlfriend in high school. We were like best friends. I mean, I still love him today. He's not talking much to me, but you know, we were really good friends, and I felt like I was lucky that I had a hard time through my whole high school. It's like the dating thing was so traumatic, and most of it, these guys were pretty boring, and you know, I just had a hard time with it. But when John and I got together, and we were like, really were soulmates and best friends, that was great. I mean, that was okay. I thought, okay, at last I've met somebody I can marry and do the right thing. And it just really didn't occur to me about my sexuality really until he said, I think you're in love with Cindy, your best friend. And I just went, oh, please. He goes, no, I think you are. And, you know, and I thought a little more about it, and I thought, oh my God, I think I might be.
So you instigated a divorce, or did he?
Well, I was very confused and very upset about, you know, what this was all about, and I just wanted to, I went to my husband, I said, I want to take a couple of weeks off. I want you to deal with the kids. I want you to deal with everything. I just need to be away a little bit and get clear about what's going on. And I mean, I wasn't involved with another woman. My best friend was straight also. But I realized that while I was, away from home, and I thought, I really do. I think I'm a lesbian, and I didn't go back home after that. And he filed for divorce papers first, but that's really what was happening.
There are an awful lot of people in our movement that were married, that have children, that sort of went through this kind of painful time. And when I was a family law attorney, I represented a number of women in divorces. And they have terrible, terrible struggle around custody. Did that happen to you?
Oh yeah.
Too? Yeah.
When the divorce papers got filed and served, my mother called me. Now, she was against the divorce. She didn't want the divorce to happen. She was worried about what that would mean and whatever. But she basically called me and said, I wanted to let you know that your father and I are going to testify against you for the kids, that we think the kids should stay with John. And, I was, number one, devastated.
Well, sure.
And I think now, when I look back on it, I mean, we're now friends and we talk, and she's my mom, and it took her years later, but to look me in the eye and cry and say, that was a mistake. Your dad and I should have never done that. I wished we would have never done that. But the reality is that I lost my 7 and 8-year-old daughter, who had been, the love of my life, and they went off and lived with their dad, basically. And they're grown now, 29 and 30. And
did you, were you able to get back in contact with them, or?
Oh yeah, we had
back into your life.
We had joint custody, but he had residential rights. And to tell you the truth, at the time, I didn't really know. When I was going through all of that stuff, I was, all of this emotional stuff was going on, and I had never had a job, and I didn't know how I was gonna, take care of myself and the kids, and, and I was coming out, and I didn't have a support system, but I knew, even in spite of all of those things, I had found myself, and I had felt like I really like myself. I'm really a strong person. I've really done great things so far, and there was something, in spite of all of the hard stuff, I just felt whole and happy and excited about what was to come ahead. And I had to deal with all of these hard things, but I knew it was the right thing. One of the things my kids say to me to this day was, Mom, the one thing we learned from you is that if you're happy with your choices, then the people around you will be happy. And, and they do things that I'm not particularly happy about. But what are you going to say when they tell you that?
Yeah, when they tell you they're happy,
right.
It's your own fault.
It's like, okay, fine. So
clearly you did find some work after the divorce.
Yeah, I did. I went, I got a job for $100 a week at the Women's Health Center out in Santa Ana, the abortion clinic.
Yeah.
And I got trained to be a counselor, and worked there, for a while. And
now you probably got a 27-page resume.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Because
it's
everywhere
just like,
I've looked, in the past and in the present, it's like, oh, Jean Harris worked here, or she ran this place for a while, or yeah, she's the one that started this program or that program.
Yeah, I think I have a short attention span or something. I don't know.
Or you like to move on to the next thing. Maybe you're an organizer.
Right.
Once a thing is organized, off you go.
Yeah. Did you ever read Saul Alinsky's book? He
sure,
says, organizers are great, but you know, the time comes when you got to move on, because either everybody hates you because of what you've made them do, or you get bored and you're done. So,
well, you spent a goodly period of your work life in political organizing, working for candidates.
Right.
Talk a little about that.
Oh gosh, let's see. Well, I worked in the first candidate thing I did was in the George McGovern presidential election. I just saw McGovern on CNN the other night. Made my heart sing. Go, babe! And you know, that was just an incredible, incredible campaign. I mean, that was like a wing and a prayer, and we never thought we would ever get any. We didn't even think we'd get the nomination. But I met some incredibly smart political thinkers and passionate, and understood that, you know, if the good folks who are in politics give up, they leave room for somebody who's not going to be so great. And I really learned from people that it's okay to have passion around your politics, that if your heart is in there and your soul is in there, you know, you win no matter what the outcome is. So
you ended up meeting some pretty interesting people in San Francisco too, as I recall.
I did.
Early on.
You know, the McGovern campaign, I met this young, he was young then, we were both young then, John Burton, who was at a meeting in Los Angeles with sort of the organizers from different parts of Southern California. We were there for a meeting to talk about, you know, what were the possibilities. And this John Burton guy, he stands up and he says, you know, this is going to be tough, you know, and no one said it's going to be easy. And he goes, but you know what? You got to have passion behind your politics. And it doesn't matter if we don't win. And it doesn't matter if this is hard. And it doesn't matter if people tell you that this can't be done. Because if you've got passion behind your politics, that's what's important, and you got to not give up. And I just remember that speech to, you know,
he would never be able to give that speech without some scatological words.
Yeah, well, I left out that. I left out the colorful.
John Burton, for those of you around the country who are not Californians, is currently the president pro tem of the state senate, and I don't think anyone was any more surprised than John when he was elected by his colleagues to be the president pro tem. And we served together in the state assembly for a while. But he was in the Congress, and
yes,
his story is a very interesting one too.
He's a great guy.
So you were working with John on political campaigns?
You know, it was that one speech, and then I just got really, really into the campaign then. I just thought it was really exciting, and I started out being sort of a neighborhood coordinator, and I organized, we were supposed to walk 10 precincts. And the next thing I know, I finished my 10, and then we did more, and then I was up to 200, and the next thing I knew, I was the director of 2 assembly districts, a field director for 2 assembly districts, and I was having this meeting up in LA with this Willie Brown Jr. And he sort of did this interview, and I got called from Long Beach to come up and talk to him about this job, and he says, what is this? You know, you're supposed to call up call the office up in LA and give us your statistics about how many, you know, people you've talked to and all of that. And I said, you know, we were told that that you people up in here in LA, if we did the work and we wrote our letters, that we'd get stamps to mail these letters back. And when you give me the stamps, I'll give you the numbers. And he kind of goes like this. He goes, I guess I should hire you, shouldn't I? So he hired me to my first paid political job in my career, and he's a mentor of mine and John, and we've known each other a long time. And
now, you know, Willie and John are both wonderful on gay and lesbian issues, and I'm assuming they might have been from the very beginning. They seem like people who really understood about discrimination, especially Willie Brown, who used to talk about growing up in Texas and was a shoeshine boy. And after he'd shine his shoes, whoever he shined his shoes for would flip a quarter into a spittoon, because it was great entertainment to watch the little boy dig around among all the, you know, spit to get his quarter for shining the shoes. And he doesn't tell the story as though it's a great oppression of him, but sort of casually, but it's just a stunning instance. And there's a man who really gets the connection
Right.
between all these different kinds of oppression and has been sort of staunchly with us. Did you
Right.
find that as you went along, or?
Yeah. John, I know that John and Willie early in their careers both really stood up for trying to change discriminatory laws against gay people in the early days. And you know, Willie Brown and his wife, when he was a young lawyer, moved to San Francisco, and they tried to buy a house in a certain neighborhood in San Francisco, and they were refused to be allowed to buy a certain house they wanted to buy because they were black. So he gets it for a whole lot of reasons. I mean, I've had some hard days where, you know, I've gotten Willie on the phone and he said, you know, Jeannie, they hate me as much as they hate you. So you just got to keep going. So, and John's always, you know, talked about when he ran for the assembly and Roberta Achtenberg was running for that same assembly seat. You know, John talked about, you know, well, you know, I've been working on these issues for rah, 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 and on and on and on, and both of them have been there for us in a big way.
I endorsed Roberta. I didn't really know John
Right.
at all.
I
but
did too. I worked.
After John was elected and I was elected that same year, I ended up being his seatmate in the assembly. And it's a funny relationship when you're seatmates in the assembly because you kind of watch each other's back around votes that you missed because you were out on the phone or whatever. And I found out later that he had asked for me to be his seatmate way in the back of the chamber. And I thought, oh, well, I'm the first gay, you know, I'm the dyke here. So they sat me way in the back. And John said to me, no, no, no. He said, that was Jesse Unruh's seat, who was the Speaker of the California Assembly. Jesse used to love it because whenever he stood up to speak, everybody had to turn around and look at him.
I love that.
You can learn, you know, you learn a lot about it, but mainly I think these mentors teach us when we got into our own movement, because frankly we'd been involved. The anti-war movement was our movement, but it feels like the gay, lesbian, transgendered, bisexual movement is really our movement. And we brought so many lessons with us, really, from them, I think.
You know, John's lesson, that speech he made to me in LA, and then when he ran for the assembly, I had a meeting with, he wanted to meet with some people about his assembly race and try to explain why we should really support him, because he's been there on gay rights. And I just looked at him and I said, you know, I haven't seen you in years, John, but you said you got to have passion for your politics, whether you can win or not. And I said, you know, Roberta's probably not going to be able to beat you, but she is me. She knows what it's like to be a lesbian, and she will have a seat at the table, and she will be speaking about something she knows about. And I've got passion for my politics, and if you win, I'll be there for you, but I got to do this. And he just kind of went, well, guess there's not much I can say about that.
Well, and when did you first then get involved in working on gay issues?
I got involved in lesbian and gay issues when I was still down in Long Beach, when we were trying to put together a women's commission for the Long Beach City Council, and the whole abortion issue was up then. So I was sort of in the women's movement. Working on lesbian gay stuff and working on the abortion issue, although being a lesbian wasn't that healthy in those days in the women's movement.
Right.
And also it was a big big thing when I realized that also being associated with the Democratic Party, which I had become really involved in from the campaigns and stuff that I had worked on, that, you know, in the women's movement, that patriarchal power kind of thing that controlled both the parties, and that was a hard thing. People were very suspicious about, you know, what was I all about.
Yeah, I found it was a difficult thing too, that there was a lot of suspicion about electoral politics, and that if you were going to change the world, then how were you going to change the world within the system that already existed? Although it is very interesting about how so many people we've met are now in positions of power, because
Right.
I think you mentioned that you had met Marcia Scott,
Right.
Early
Santa
on, I
Cruz.
guess.
Yeah, in Santa Cruz back in 83, 84, something like that.
And were you working on political stuff together?
I had, when I was still straight, I worked in a governor's race, and the big governor's race with Jerry Brown and Bob Moretti and Jerry Waldie and George Moscone. They were all running for governor in the primary, and I was working for Jerry Waldie, and I met this young man whose name was John Laird in that campaign. And when I moved to Santa Cruz, I was at this volleyball game down on the beach, and I hear this voice going, Gene Harris, is that the Gene Harris? And I'm kind of going, well, I am Gene Harris. He goes, it's me, John Laird. And I'm going, oh my God, you're gay. And he goes, I knew it someday you would be. And and John was the mayor of Santa Cruz. He'd been on the city council, and he was up for re-election. And I met Marcia Scott there because my partner was in a class at the junior college, and we got together and had drinks and dinner, and then we started talking politics, and then she and I worked on John Laird's re-election campaign, and she used to we'd sit and talk about, she'd say, well, my friend Bill, someday when he's in president, someday he'll be the president and we'll be at the Capitol, and I'm going, yeah, right, Marcia. Then after he got elected, Marcia, I went to Washington, D.C. for some political thing I was working on, and damned if we weren't sitting in the president's lunch at the lunchroom at the White House, ordering food. I'm in my Armani suit with my necktie, and Marcia's going, see, didn't I tell you? So that was pretty amazing. Small world.
It is kind of to trace all of the people when we write our autobiographies. Well, I mean, I don't even know whether everyone will be interested in all the people that we knew when they were, working behind the counter at Woolworth's. But it's certainly interesting how many people we keep sort of intersecting with, and in different avatars in different places. So was most of your work then for the community before you went to Oregon to kind of work on their initiative issues, mostly in California?
Yeah, it was mostly in California. After I lived in Santa Cruz for about a year, and then I moved up to San Francisco because that's where everything was happening. And I was fortunate enough, I was involved in a congressional race that was between Nancy Pelosi and Harry Britt. And Harry's the person who took Harvey Milk's place. And Nancy won that race by 3,000 Republican vote by mail absentee ballots. 3,000 Republican votes. We beat her on the election day, but so after I was involved in that congressional race, I went to work for Harry in City Hall in San Francisco, and I worked for him for about 6 years, and he just was an incredible, I mean, a lot of people say, who's this Harry Britt guy? Well, Harry's mission was, and he was a great person to work for. He didn't care if his name was in the paper. He didn't care if he got credit for legislation. He said, my job is to continue the legacy of Harvey Milk and make sure that he is not forgotten, and why he died is not forgotten, and that's why I'm here, and that is my only purpose. And we did some incredible work together.
So in working for Harry, I'm assuming that some of the work you did at least had to do with issues about our community or for our community in the city of San Francisco.
Right.
What kinds of stuff were you working on for him?
Well, we had done everything from, immigration, sanctuary legislation to, Harry wanted to, now that Dianne Feinstein was not the mayor anymore and Art Agnos was the mayor, he wanted to bring back domestic partners as an issue because they had passed it. The Board of Supervisors had passed it in '79, and Feinstein had vetoed it back in those days. And she had continued to be the mayor, and Harry could never introduce that again because she would just veto it again. But once she was gone, we started having a team of people together strategizing about how would we do this and how could we protect the benefits side, and what was the vision behind that. And what we decided to do was create a task force that would look at the benefits that the mayor would create, and we would pass a way to register your relationship with the county government through the Board of Supervisors. And of course, one of the big arguments was, don't do that because someone will, the right will try to, we had a handful of right-wingers in San Francisco, would put it on the ballot, and we might not be able to win that. And it would be devastating if in a city like San Francisco, the gay mecca of the world, that we couldn't pass domestic partners at the ballot box. But we felt like it was important enough to push the envelope, and we did. We passed it through the Board of Supervisors, the mayor signed it, and the right wing put it on the ballot. And that first election, we lost by 1,300 votes.
Wow.
And it was the year that the earthquake happened, and we had to stop the campaign, and we raised, I think, $35,000 for the earthquake relief fund, but it was 10 days of not campaigning, and then we went in to get out the vote, and 1,300 votes is not that much, but you only have to win or lose by one vote.
Well, it's interesting, the transition in that time, looking back at it, because a lot of what our community decided to try to do when it first did notice that there were laws that could probably help us. We worked at the local level. There was no question we were going to get anything at the state level anywhere.
Right.
It was too soon, and states were all terribly variegated, especially California with 38 million people. But we were targeting local jurisdictions, a few domestic partnership ordinances, etc. And it seems to me it was at about that time that the right wing really began to focus on their own use of the ballot box, their own way of using the law or the electoral process as a tool of holding us down, essentially.
Right.
And I know that there were a number of places in the country where they started putting things on the ballot, and on the statewide ballot, which was a good strategy for them, because statewide it looked like it was always easier for them to win. You would find more prejudice, less education statewide than you might be able to educate a city or a town.
Right.
And was it about this time that Oregon called you up? Because they were facing something and they needed some help.
They had an anti-gay measure on their ballot in Oregon in 1988, in 1992, and in 1994. I got called by the campaign people in 1994. It was one of those cases where they thought the court was going to throw out the measure as unconstitutional, and so they kept waiting for this court decision. And when the decision finally came, it came the way we didn't want it to come. They said we're going to go ahead and put this on the ballot. So we had like a 30-day window to raise. I mean, we ended up raising and spending about $2.3 million, which is not a whole heck of a lot. Doesn't sound like a lot in California, but in Oregon, that's only 1.9 million voters.
Right.
It's a lot of money to raise in a short turnaround. And I got called to come up and run the field operation because people knew I had had some experience in San Francisco with the 3 ballot measures we had 3 years in a row, and how we built, we kept building on those races on how to finally come up with the right formula to make it click. And so I went up to Oregon, and boy, that was, for some, I felt like I'd been in politics a long time, but Oregon is on the cutting edge of the right wing over here, a bunch of lefties from the 60s who moved up there, and Oregonians who've always been there, and then a whole big group in the middle. And the right wing was using that tactic to continually put things, anti-gay things, on the ballot and just keep the community from chasing their tails and spending money and over and over again. So I was lucky enough to go up there and be a part of that whole No on 13, and we beat them.
Now it was, well, it's not a different kind of strategy, but there is something that, at least from a distance, it looks like happened in Oregon that has yet to happen in a lot of places, that really, it looks like coalition. It looks like a lot of people beyond just the members of our community
Right.
caring about it. How did that come about?
You know, that's really what happened in Oregon. We had to, you know, and you have to understand this is also a state that's about, I think it's 99.3 white. And for someone who came from Los Angeles and San Francisco, where, you know, people of color are like 76%, and then you work in coalitions with different groups of people and sort of help each other on different issues and try to come together, and that's how you win. I sort of went, whoa, it's hard to tell the Democrats from the Republicans here, and how do you build a coalition there to beat these anti-gay measures? And, you know, we developed relationships with labor, with the pro-choice folks. The environment is a very big deal in Oregon, and we just slowly but surely over the years developed a strong relationship with different groupings of people, to the point where we developed a statewide voter file, to where we put all of our members all into one pot, and we did get out the vote, and we figured out a system to where the lesbian, gay, bi, trans community's family just kept expanding until this last time around. You know, we just had business folks in the chamber. I went to Oregon, and the Chamber of Commerce was opposing these anti-gay bills, and like business was one of the best friends of the community. I'm going, what? And and that's still going on in Oregon. And, you know, I have to say, the right wing came up with this strategy to keep us busy and to spend our money, and they could raise money off our backs from their members.
Right.
It really raised money so they could work on some of these other issues that they're also anti on. And
but it sort of backfired.
It backfired because the people in Oregon created this ongoing organization that its job is to stay campaign ready to fight these anti-gay measures. And now we do candidate endorsements and raise money for candidates, and we lobby in the legislature, and we have an education project that we work with the business community, religious institutions, and educational institutions. And lesbian, gay, bi, trans issues are talked about more in the state of Oregon, I think, than any state in the union. And they're honest about it. They're very opinionated, and they really slug it out. And it's been a really good education for me and a good experience. And I am so proud to have had the chance to work with people who have been attacked over and over and over again, and will still stand up and be counted, and come out at 3:30 in the morning to go out and do door hangers in all over the state in a place like Oregon, which is really kind of scary at times. And, you know, they got passion with their politics, and boy, it was my cup of tea. So,
well, it is interesting, these coalitions, because people in the labor movement have always been passionate. People in the environmental movement are quite passionate, but often you don't see a real understanding of the relationship between and among these different movements, about people just being able to work, you know, without being treated unfairly.
Right.
People wanting to maintain the environment for future generations, because if we waste it, it's gone. And then this whole social justice movement about poverty, about really about even urban environmental issues, which have brought together coalitions with impoverished people who've been talking for years and never made league with environmentalists who seem to be off in the mountains somewhere where nobody lived. It looks to me, and I've always been an optimist, like these new and larger coalitions are really sort of what will be happening in the next decade, and certainly what I think is necessary for us to counter, because the enemy is always the same. I don't mean to talk about people as enemies, but and we call them the right wing or whatever, but it seems like the antagonism is focused on gay and lesbian, on those damn environmentalists, on the unions. I mean, you know, I hear the rhetoric on the floor of the assembly all the time. And when we realize that we're all being attacked and
Right.
you know, on the same basis. It seems to make coalition make a lot more sense anyway. Well, as you know, now we've got an initiative here in California that seems to me like the right wing has essentially been pushed back a lot on issues of fairness at work and hopefully on issues of fairness at school. But where family matters are concerned, the sort of the center of it, that's where they're still kind of drawing the line around
Right.
marriage. And even though only a man and a woman can get married in California, that's already the law, this initiative, the so-called Knight Initiative, would pretty much dictate that even if you got validly married in some other state or country, it wouldn't be recognized in California. Do you see the same kind of organizing, A, going on, and B, even more important maybe, working in California, state like California, where we don't have all of these connections made yet?
Well, California's bigger, but you know, you just sort of break it down, and I do see, in fact, Harry Britt called me and we had a conversation about this. He says, when are you coming back to California? You know, and this was before I knew I would maybe be coming back to California. But I think that we have to, I think that it's really important that we get the vision of and complete those connections with labor, and because you know we can win. We can win, and we're being attacked. Unions are being attacked. Immigration is being attacked. Affirmative action is being attacked. Choice is being attacked. Gay, lesbian stuff is being attacked, and it's pretty much the same people who are doing one are doing the other. It's, you know, a few people may not cross over, but a lot of the money sources sometimes come from the same place, and that we need to come together around all of our issues and fight back. And I think that's really where we're at now, is that we need to do a little more organizing, a little more grassroots, a little more talking to each other. You know, I know that when I did organizing in San Francisco, I realized by about the second Domestic Partners campaign that I'd never even been in the black neighborhood in San Francisco. And that the big change in that second campaign is that we all came together and we walked in, you know, lesbian and gay people walked in Chinatown, we walked over in the Mission in the Latino district, we walked in the black community, and we walked in each other's communities, and we worked together, and we got to know each other. And I think that's what we need to do more of. I mean, that's what we had to do in Oregon. We had to talk to business people. You know, we had to talk to each other and make those linkages. And I think we're in a really exciting time, because we now have the challenge right in front of us here in California. The right wing looked at their polling and they saw that gay marriage is a very scary thing for people out there, and they know it's a weak link for us. But it's a challenge for us to like dive into this thing, get to know each other, talk to each other, register each other, get out the vote, and really start putting this whole connection together. Now, it may not all work this time around, but this thing, I think the right-wing strategy is to go state by state. They've been trying to do this anti-gay marriage thing state by state by state, and you know, we're smart enough to turn that around and make it work for us. And I think that's exactly what we can do here in California. I mean, we had the same anti-gay bills in the legislature this last time, and we had all of our friends who we brought into our family over the last 10 years hammer those elected officials in the legislature. We had editorials in the main, you know, big newspapers, and we made sure that every single Democrat did not bail on us. And we killed all those bills. So we don't have a ballot measure in Oregon this November.
Well, we killed all the bills too, which is partly why we do have a ballot measure here. I mean, it's a last-ditch effort to get stuff on the ballot and paying the signature gatherers, and there's a lot of money behind this. And we did not get absolutely every Democrat on board for our issues, but mostly, and I was thrilled at the passionate speeches people made on the floor in favor of our protection bills, which we now have sort of gone through for the first time, gotten a majority. So things do change. And you're back in California, hey Jean?
I'm back in California.
At least you will be for, but not quite sure what the next step is on work?
No, I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up yet. I kind of have to look around and see what, what's needed and where I plug in.
And your partner, Gwen Baldwin, is the fairly new, not brand new, executive director of the center here in LA.
That's right.
So that's an interesting change for you too, hey?
Very.
Yeah.
She's the poobah.
Yeah, she's the poobah. It's a wonderful center too, but it'll keep her pretty busy.
It's been keeping her busy.
So what do you think about the future for us? I mean, I think that this combination, this synergy of those of us who've worked in movement politics and worked in electoral politics kind of coming together because this is the arena, this is sort of the center. There are other centers though. All the churches, temples, I mean, every religious body, we seem to be kind of in the middle of the griddle. I mean, it's a lot of debate and discussion about our community. Where do you think the next great work for activists in our community will be?
Well, I really do think and believe there's a new wave, a new generation of young people that are coming into the queer movement, and they are hungry to know about all of this power structure and politics and who calls the shots and how do you learn how to do all of this stuff. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of the connection of mainstream politics and grassroots organizing and building coalitions. So I think it's going to be a lot harder for the right wing to continue in the manner that they've been continuing on.
What a great finish for the show. Thank you so much for joining us on Get Used to It. Thank you very much for watching another Voices of Our Lives. Jean Harris, longtime activist. You go out and do the same. Then everybody will get used to it.